Okay. So it's good to see everyone as we are in the midst of the 10 days of what's called the 10 days of repentance, Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, and just muting all. Just feel free to unmute if you have a question or comment. So Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, the 10 days of repentance. During that 10 days, there's always Shabbat. So there's always a Shabbat between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And that Shabbat is called Shabbat Shuvah, based on the very first word of the Haftarah, which is mainly from the prophet Hosea, Shuvah Yisrael, return, O Israel, with a theme of repentance. I'm just looking for it in the Chumash. Just a second. Yeah, Shuva Yisrael ad Adonai Elohecha. Return, O Israel, Israel to the Lord your God. So the Torah portion for Shabbat Shuva is usually Haazinu, page 1185, which it is this year. Sometimes it's Vayelech. And it's Vayelech only if there happens to be a Shabbat between Yom Kippur and Sukkot. So it just, in figuring out the calendar, this year there isn't a Shabbat between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, right? Yom Kippur is the 10th day of Tishrei, and Sukkot begins on the 15th day of Tishrei. So 5 days, you don't necessarily have a Shabbat in between. And this year there isn't, right? Yom Kippur, Sunday night, Monday. Sukkot begins Friday night, Shabbat. So in that case then, Nitzavim and Vayelech were combined together as they were the week before Rosh Hashanah. And that leaves Haazinu, so that the very last portion in Deuteronomy, Vizot HaBracha, will be read on Simchat Torah. Okay, so that's how the Torah portions work. The Haazinu has to be read before the holiday of Sukkot, so that then Vizot HaBracha, the last portion, the portion that comes after Haazinu, will be read on Simchat Torah. Okay, so these there are rules then as to when portions are read and how it fits into the calendar. So let's take a look at the portion Haazinu. Like I said, it begins on page 1185 in the Eitz Chaim, or just look for chapter 32 of the book of Deuteronomy in whatever Chumash or edition of the Torah you're using. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So the end of the portion Vayelech, which we read 2 weeks ago, Moses said what God commanded Moses to teach the people a poem that would be kind of a summary of who they are, how they got to Israel, and what their religious mission is. It also has prophecy for the future in it as well. So the poem serves as a one chapter articulation of, at that time, what it meant to be an Israelite. Okay, so the people were supposed to hear the entire Torah being read, and every Sukkot, people are supposed to gather and hear the Torah be read, and this poem they're supposed to have in mind all the time. It should be accessible to them, and if we understand a little bit of a history of Jewish liturgy, the more poetic a prayer is, the more likely people were to remember it, because we have to know with the history of the printing press, right? The printing press was invented in the 1400s, which made then books readily accessible to everyone. Before that time, only rich people had books. They were they are technically called codexes. That is, you write on a parchment, and the parchment pages are then sewn together into a book, but the book is called a codex. So only parchment's expensive because the process of making a parchment is labor intensive. And then writing on the parchment is expensive too because you have to pay somebody to write onto the parchment, right? We take for granted that there's notepads that you can scribble on, or that there's our computer to write on Google Docs or Microsoft Word and then connect it to a printer and print it out, right? Everybody has a laptop or a computer. Everybody has a printer. It's easy to do, but it's remarkable that I'm sure Gutenberg had no idea what would happen in the future when he invented his printing press, right? So manuscripts are expensive. Codexes then, extremely expensive, so only the wealthy would do that, because the wealthy then would also pay not just a scribe to write the codex, but also an illustrator to add beautiful illumination in the manuscript as well. So we have, for example, Haggadot, like the famous Sarajevo Haggadah as one example, or the Moss Haggadah as another one, are beautiful examples of how wealthy people commissioned these Haggadot. So in synagogue then, if you went to synagogue to pray, you did not have a prayer book in front of you. Only if you're wealthy might you have had a codex, a prayer book codex in front of you. The synagogue itself, if it was wealthy enough, would have a codex of the Siddur on the lectern, but that's it. Everybody else would be following along. So that's why it's so important to respond Amen. There's a halacha, Jewish law, about responding Amen. So the person saying the blessing has to be obligated to say the blessing so that the congregation can respond, halachically respond with Amen. And by responding Amen, it's as if we have said the prayer or the blessing ourselves, right? And we could sing along with the prayers if the prayers are written in a way that they're easy to remember, right? So that's why many of the prayers are written in alphabetical order, like Ashrei, the psalm that's in the service, in morning and afternoon service, is relatively easy to remember because it's in alphabetical order. And many other prayers are written that way as well. Okay, so the idea then of our Torah portion being a poem comes from the reality of the day where people, the average person, couldn't afford to write this poem down because they didn't. You could have a quill, that's easy, but getting the paper to write on, that required money. Okay, so let's start with this poem then. Again, 1185, chapter 32 of Deuteronomy. Haazinu hashamayim va'adabera v'tishma haaretz imrei fi. Okay, so I'm going to translate, and then we'll see what the Eitz Chaim says the translation is. The heaven should listen or give ear, right? Ozen is an ear, oznaim are ears. So haazinu means the verb that comes from the noun ear. Okay, so give ear. The heavens should give ear, and I will speak. the earth should listen, or no, the earth should hear the words of my mouth. No, the utterances of my mouth. Okay, so a couple notes about this. Okay, that Moses is calling on heaven and earth to be a witness to what he's about to say. And the idea that he's calling heaven and earth to do this is a biblical poetic tool. That is, if you use the extremes, then you mean everything that's in between the extremes. So when Moses says, heavens give ear, earth listen, he means all of the world and the universe should be listening. Okay, so not just the heaven, not just the earth, but everything should be listening to what Moses is about to say. Okay? Ya'arof kamatar likhi, tizal katal imrati, kiseirim ale desha, vechir vivim ale esev. My lesson, lekach, ki lekach tov natanti lachem, a good lesson I have given you. That's what we say right before we start singing Eitz Chaim Hi, right? So lekach is a lesson. Lakach means to take. So what we take from what we learn is a lesson. Okay, so that's, so Hebrew is like that. These three-letter roots, Lamed, Kuf, Chet, in this instance, is you can understand the development of other words from that three-letter root. So my lesson, what I'm about to teach, should come down as the rain. There are a couple words for rain. Modern word for rain is geshem. Biblical word for rain is matar. All right, so my lesson, my teaching should come down as the rain, and my utterance, what I'm about to say, should, it says here, distill as the dew. Whatever dew does to get onto the grass by the time we see it in the morning, before it evaporates, how it gets there, that's that word, tizal. So rain comes down, dew appears through condensation, whatever it is, the condensation process of dew, that's my words should appear like dew appears. My teaching should come down like rain comes down, like showers on the grass and like droplets on the grass. Deshe and Asev are the same, essentially the same word. Okay? So, in other words, another aspect of biblical poetry is that the first phrase and the second phrase of a sentence are synonymous. And by having the phrases be synonymous, where it emphasizes the message, right? The heavens should listen as I speak. The earth should listen as I speak, right? So synonymous. My lesson will come down as the rain. My utterance will appear like the dew. Okay, rain and dew, teaching, rain, dew. Okay, it should like showers on the grass, like droplets on the grass. Okay, so this is a prime example of biblical poetry, the synonyms, because if we were to define what poetry is, or the what makes something a poem, I think we would say that it rhymes, right? Rhyming is a main feature of poetry. There are other, of course, other layers to what a poem is and what makes a poem different from a novel. But we would say in English, and probably in French too, and other languages, rhyming is important. In Hebrew, rhyming is not a main feature of poetry. It does happen, but that's not the main feature because rhyming is so easy in Hebrew. Uh, Feminine words almost always end with the vowel, the T vowel, and the letter hey. So if most feminine words end that way, it's so easy to rhyme feminine words. In the plural, masculine words end with im, right? The dot, and then the yud, and the final mem. All masculine words end with im. All feminine words end with ot, the letter vav with the dot on top, and the letter tuf. So if you can rhyme words in plural, and you can rhyme most feminine words, there's no challenge then to the poet to rhyme. So the poet then looks to other challenges where Western poetry learned a lot from Greek poetry, and that is the meter of the line, right? How many syllables in a line, right? We think of a haiku, a Japanese haiku. What is that? 575 or something like that, whatever the structure is supposed to be of how many syllables per line, right? The meter, like iambic pentameter, is one classic style of writing a poem to meet the certain amount of syllables per line and how those syllables are emphasized, right? So the meter. So Arabic poetry is the same. So Hebrew poetry in the Middle Ages, which was influenced by Greek and Arabic poetry, Hebrew poetry has meter to it that you can do, whether words rhyme or not. And then you can also do alphabetic acrostics. So that makes a challenge too, to come up with a poem that will go in alphabetical order, or it could be reverse alphabetical order. You could try to embed your name as the poet into the poem itself. So like the first letter of a few lines would spell out the name of the poet who wrote that particular poem. And you'd have also the opportunity or possibility of having a subject divided into two parts in your sentence, right? So there are different ways stylistically of composing a poem, and we see that with this biblical poem that Haazinu is. Okay, so Moses is calling to the heavens and the earth to listen, to all creation to listen to what he's about to say, that the words should pour down as the rain and appear as the dew on the grass. Verse 3, Ki Shem Adonai Ekra Havu Godel Lelohenu, because I'm invoking or proclaiming God's name, we should give praise or exalt. We should exalt our God. Okay, so the first three sentences, this teaching is going to come down like rain. All creation should pay attention because it is a way, these teachings are going to be invoking God's name and exalting God. Okay, so that in first three sentences, that's what this poem is supposed to do. Okay, so now the poem talks about God. Hatsur tamim pa'alo, kichol derachav mishpat, el emunah ve'en avel, tzadik v'yashar hu. Hatsur, so God has a number of names and a number of descriptors. A common one is calling God a tsur, the rock. And this isn't just a rock, it's like a boulder. Okay, it's a big rock, something that is there in the ground that However it got there, it's now going to stay there because there's a sense of permanence to the rock and a sense of solidity to the rock. Okay, so that is a common, right? So when before the Amida in the morning service, we sing Sur Yisrael Kuma Be'ezrat Yisrael, right? We sing that before the silent Amida, or we start the Amida out loud. The Rock of Israel. Let's stand up with for the help. Stand up for the help of Israel. Okay, so the Rock of Israel. Also, after we light the candles every night of Hanukkah, Ma'oz Sur Yeshuati, the Rock of Ages. Right, that's how it's translated. But Ma'oz Sur Yeshua. So the strength of the rock is my salvation. That's what that means. The rock, God. Okay, so Sur. Is this the first time in the Torah that God's referred to as a rock? It could be, but there are other places in the Bible later on that God is referred to as a rock also. So the pure rock. So the rock, his deeds are perfect. Okay, so Tamim could be perfect, it could be innocent, it could be pure. So the rock, his actions are pure, perfect, innocent, without blemish. Okay? So the actions of the rock are tamim, or could be also righteous, because all of his ways are just. God is a loyal or faithful God, and not false. El emunah ve'ein avel. So in poetry, the grammar is allowed to be played with. God is a God of faith or loyalty, not false, right? So God isn't going to have dual loyalties. Tzadik v'yasharhu. It's translated true and upright is he. So I would say righteous and honest. So yashar means straight. Yashar can also mean honest. There's no bending. There's no influencing God for God to make any compromises. And Sadiq could be saintly, could be righteous, could be just. All right, so a number of words to try to translate what Sadiq is. Okay, so this is what God is. We're on 1186 now. Shichet lo banav mumam, dor ikesh ufetal tol. So this is hard to translate, and I'm going to use the translation here. Shichet lo, so the translation is not going in order of the words as written. Children unworthy of him, that is, lo banav mumam, children unworthy of him. Shichet lo dor ikeshu fetal tol, that crooked, perverse generation, dor ikeshu fetal tol, their baseness has played him false. Okay, shichet lo, their baseness has played him false. Lo banav mumam, children are unworthy of him. Dor ikeshu fetal tol, that crooked, perverse generation. Okay, so now this is the lesson about the rock who is perfect and the children who are not worthy of him. Now, this begs the question, when was this poem written? If the poem was written like the end of last week's portion says, that God commands Moses to write this poem, why is this generation not worthy of God? Why else are they entering the land of Israel if not because they are worthy of God? Moses is the one not worthy of God because he's not going into the land of Israel. So if anyone's not worthy, it's Moses not being worthy. So why is he calling the children unworthy? Unless two things. Either this is a prophecy, like a warning, don't let yourself be crooked and perverse. That's what this poem could try to do, to try to inspire people to stay on the true straight path. So maybe that's what this is a reference to. Or the poem was written later in the time of the Bible, when the people were, the poem and the book of Deuteronomy, written later, reflecting the generation that the prophets were talking to, the generation that has neglected God and strayed from God's path. Okay, so the fact that verse 5 is referring to a generation that is crooked and perverse then begs this question, right? So I mean, we can look at the commentary here on page 1186, children unworthy of him. This verse states the second main theme of the poem. Israel, in contrast to God, is faithless and perfidious, a crooked, perverse generation. The reference to the people Israel as God's children is part of the parent-child metaphor through which the poem expresses God's relationship with Israel. The translation of this verse is a paraphrase because the text is difficult and of uncertain meaning. Right? That's the problem with poetic Hebrew, especially with the book of Job as a prime example of that. There could be some Hebrew words there that don't appear anyplace else, or don't take that particular form anyplace else. So it requires a little bit of ingenuity to kind of figure out what it means. Okay, verse 6. Ha la Adonai tigmelu zot, am naval velo chacham. Halohu avicha kanecha, hu asecha vayachonanecha. So I'm going to have to use the English translation here again. Do you thus requite the Lord, O dull and witless people? Is he not the Father who created you, fashioned you, and made you endure? So, in other words, what Moses, the author of the poem, is saying here, why are you a crooked, perverse generation? Didn't God make you? How can you be so stupid, dull and witless people? Am naval velo chacham. How can you not be wise enough to understand God created you? And because God created you, that means that you have to be a righteous people, right? So that like 2 + 2 = 4. God created you, therefore I have to be good to God. Okay, that's the equation that Israelites, Jews have to live up to. Okay, so, but the people that the poet is speaking to have decided not to disregard that equation. Okay, verse 7. Zechor yamot olam, binu shnot dor vador, sha'al avicha v'yagedcha, zekenecha v'yomru lach. Remember the days of old. Understand the years of generations gone by. Ask your father and he'll tell you. Your elders and they'll tell you. Okay, so understand your history, the poet is saying. Bahanchel elyon goyim, bahafrido b'nei adam, yatsev gevulot amim, lemispar b'nei Yisrael. When Elyon, another name for God, the supreme being, or here it says the Most High, when the Most High gave portions to the nations, when he divided up the children of Adam, or divided up humanity, when he fixed the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the people of Israel. Okay, Israel was small, other nations bigger, other nations have bigger land. Israel has its portion too. 9, Ki chelek Adonai amo, Yaakov chevel nachalato. God's portion is his people. Jacob is the land allotment of his. Yimsa'ehu be'eretz midbar, uvetohu yelel yeshimon, yesovavenhu yevonanehu, yitzrenhu ki ishon eno. He found him, that is, God found him, people of Israel, in the land of the desert, and out of chaos, in an empty, howling waste, or chaos, empty, howling chaos. Tohu, the first verse in the Bible, or in the very beginning of the Torah, and the land was tohu vavohu, right? So tohu vavohu was utter waste or utter chaos. Okay, so God found us in the desert region, which is desolation, and in waste. He found in an empty, howling waste. He engirded him, watched over him, guarded him as the pupil of his eye. All right, we're chapter 32 of Deuteronomy. Now verse 11. This is page 1187 in the Eitz Chaim. Kenesher Yair Kino al Gozalav Yerachef Yifros Kenafav Yikachehu Yisaehu El Evrato. Like an eagle who rouses his nestlings. So Cain, Kuf Nun, is a nest. Kino is his nest. Yair wakes up, arouses. As an eagle arouses his nest, he gliding down to his young chicks. That's redundant. To his chicks. He spreads his wings and takes him. That is the young, the chick in the nest. He carries him on his pinions. I don't know what the pinions are. Is that the back of the bird, carrying the chicks on the back of his bird, on his back as he's flying? That's what God is doing to us, carrying us and protecting us like the mightiest of all birds, soaring higher than any other creature. 12, Adonai badad yanchenu, ve'en imo el nechar. God alone guided him, and and there is no other God, or there's no strange God with him. There's only one God. That one God took us out of the chaos and the waste, and like an eagle takes its young, God took us also to show, with the lesson being to show everyone in the world that we are the chosen people. Okay, it doesn't say that in the poem, but I think that's the one idea that we get from this lesson and this image of us as the chick, God as the eagle, and God taking us. So before anything happens to the chick, if the chick falls out of the nest, before it's ready to fly, it could die. So the eagle saves its young. God saved us also. 13, Yarkivehu al bamote aretz, vayochal tinuvot sadai, vayeni kehu devash misela, veshemen mechalamish tsur. So God rode him, set him, Yarkivehu. Rechev is a vehicle, okay, usually as a chariot, but Yarkivehu, he conveyed him, transported him to the highlands so that he can eat the yield of my fields. He weaned him, nursed him with honey from a rock and oil from a flinty rock. So this is the miracle so God, like the eagle taking its chick, that God placed us in the highlands so that we can eat the bounty of the earth, or the fruit of the earth, and feed us miraculously. Honey from a rock, oil, that probably means olive oil, from a flinty rock, right? So we get our sustenance from a land that might not be inherently fertile. So this is what God provided for us, and it goes on with verse 14. Chemat bakar v'chalev son im chalev karim ve'elim b'nei vashan va'atudim im chalev kilyot chita v'dam einav tishteh chamer. So what else? We have the butter. Well, I translate it as butter because chemah in modern Hebrew is butter. So it says here, curd of kine. Kine is a fancy word for cattle. Might be a particular age of cattle, but still, the curd of kine and milk of sheep, okay, with the best of lambs, and the rams of Bashan, which is like the Galilee, and he-goats with the best wheat and the blood of grapes. I mean, you could have said grape juice, but the blood of grapes was your drink. Well, foaming grape blood was your drink, right? We get honey from a rock. We get oil from a rock. We get the best of dairy from the cattle and flocks. We have the best lambs and the best rams and he-goats and the best wheat and the best wine. What else could we ask for? Where everything is provided for us in great abundance. 15, and as a result, Vayishman Yeshurun Vayivat, Shamanta Avita Kasita, Vayitosh Eloah Asahu, Vayinabel Sur Yeshuato. So Yeshurun, so Jeshurun is another name for Israel. This is the first time it appears in the Torah, but it's like, that's why some synagogues are called B'nai Jeshurun, as opposed to B'nai Israel, which would be a more common name, or Beth Israel. B'nai Jeshurun is a name for a synagogue. I knew one in Philadelphia. There's a B'nai Jeshurun on the Upper West Side. Okay, so it comes from here. So Jeshurun grew fat and kicked as a result of having everything given to it. It grew fat and kicked. You grew fat, gross, and coarse. You forsook the God who made him, or he forsook the God who made him, and spurned the rock of his, now it says support, but salvation. Ma'oz sur Yeshuati, the rock of my salvation. Sur Yeshuato, the rock of his salvation. Right? The way Hebrew is arranged is that you have the I, you, he, she, we, they is in the prefix, and the same is in the no. You have yes, you could have it in the prefix in the future tense. You have it in the suffix, and you also have the prefix can also determine whether it's future tense or right. So the word itself, the three-letter root, has prefixes and suffixes added to it to extend the word for future tense, past tense, present tense, and also for possession, like perspective. I'd forget the grammatical term for it, but it's first person, second person, third person. Okay, so
Can I just ask a question? Or
yes, go ahead, Lori.
yeah, going back to Jeshurun,
Yes.
I didn't quite understand what that means.
Okay, so the commentary explains Jeshurun, Hebrew Yeshurun, the upright,
Okay.
from Yashar, meaning upright or straight or honest, which alludes to Israel and sounds something like it. Well, I don't know. Yisrael, Yeshurun. That's kind of misleading because Yisrael, that when Jacob got the name Israel, it's because he wrestled with God. So it's Yisrael has that. So it's the letter sin in Yisrael. Yeah, Shurun is the letter shin. So yeah, homiletically you can play with the shin and the sin. It looks like the same letter, but grammatically it's not. So Yeshurun, it comes from Yashar, meaning upright, and that's just a descriptor of Israel, that we are the upright. Okay, so that's what the commentary says here. Okay. So verse 16, Yakniuhu bizarim betoevot yach isuhu. They incensed him, that is God, with alien things. That's right, because in other words, they became attracted to idols, and that vexed him with abominations. Toefot yachisuhu, made him angry with abominations. 17, how do they do this? Yizbechu lashedim lo Eloah, Elohim lo yedaum, chadashim mikarov ba'u, lo se'arum avotechem. Right, so they sacrificed to demons, not God. To gods they did not know. New things that came along recently, who stirred not your father's fears. Lo se'arum avotechem. So, right, you're right. The Septuagint, so the commentary says, to try to figure out the grammar and the wording here, so the Greek translation says, whom your fathers did not know. So which is could be a better word for than what's here, Sa'arum, who, right? Gods you didn't know, new things that came along recently that your fathers did not know. 18, Sur Yeladecha Teshi, Vatishkach El Mecholalecha. You neglected the rock that begot you, forgot the God who brought you forth. All right, so God saved you like the eagle saves its chick, brought you to the land to set you up high, right? To protect you from other people, right? Living up high, it's harder for people to attack you. And you had the best the best of the land, even miraculously, honey coming from rocks, but you had the best of the flocks in your possession, and you gave it all up. You forgot God and you followed other gods. All right, so it's the poem is kind of negative here, and it's mostly takes this negative form in either if we see it traditionally as told by Moses to the people at that time as they're about to enter Israel. This is a prophecy, and this is supposed to make you scared and keep you faithful to God, or it was written later on in response to how the people had already neglected God. So I want to stop here for today. We made it through the first 3 aliyot. Wish everybody a happy and a healthy new year. Yeah, and so next week will be the week before Sukkot. So we'll look at the Torah portion of the week is the Sukkot Torah reading. So either we'll look at the Torah reading or the Haftarah for Sukkot next week. Have a good day, everybody.
Shana Tova. It's nice to see
Shana Tova.
everybody.
Not of,
Good to see you too, Deborah.
Thanks.